Hello, and welcome to the Year-Round Harvest Program, helping you to grow food security for your family and your community. I'm Rachel, and today we're going to talk about using these tools to get your soil ready for planting without harming your soil or your body. So we're talking about preparing beds for planting. You may not need to do a lot of digging to prepare your beds for planting. One way to be easy on both our soil and our bodies is to dig as little as possible. In a bed that's been gardened year after year, probably all you need to do is clear the weeds off the surface, and that's something these hoes can be good for. The hoes are also helpful for chopping in soil amendments that you're using, fertilizer, lime, anything like that. You don't want to do too much digging because that can damage your soil structure if you dig too much. Which brings us to when. Right now you can probably see that it's a sunny day, and maybe you can tell from my clothes that it's a cold sunny day. It's January 23rd. It hasn't rained for 3 days. And I'm lucky enough to have very well-drained soil, sandy loam with a lot of rocks in it. So that means that 3 days of no rain is plenty. If your soil has a lot of clay in it, and we'll talk about soils in more depth in another class, if your soil has a lot of clay in it, if you have puddles, you probably need to wait until things dry out a bit because it can damage your soil, and it can also be harder on your body to dig in soil that's really wet. But this soil's pretty dry. You can see I can even get in it with my fingers. And there's some really nice soil. This has been a garden since 2007, so 14 years. And that will also make it easier. But if you're preparing new beds, it might be a little hard work. So, general principles of taking care of your body. I am standing up. The less you bend over, the better it is for your back. So that's one thing. I'm not a very tall person, and this is a good length of handle for me. I can do what I need to do standing up. The taller you are, the longer handle you want to have on your tools. If you're really tall, you may need to make your own handles. But this tool, plenty long for me. The less you pound on the ground, the easier it's going to be on your wrists and your elbows and really all of your body. Which brings us to why I have the Heavy Hoe. A lot of people might think that bigger, heavier tools are better for bigger, stronger people, but actually big, heavy tools can do the work for you. And I'll show you the difference in that. So let's look at how these two hoes work. This hoe, you can see the blade isn't very long. It does have a nice sharp edge on it, and I'm gonna make it a little sharper. Take my file. Let's see. Hold it steady. If you put one of these wooden handles on your file, it makes it a little easier to use. And you notice when I'm filing, I'm going towards the blade. That movement will actually make it dull, so you always want to go towards it to sharpen it. So I've touched up the edge a little bit. You might be able to see that it looks extra shiny now where I touched it up. So I'm going to get these weeds that are in the path, and you can think of it just like sweeping the floor. Just cuts right through the weeds right below the surface in the mulch. And if I want to get over here, I can reach a little bit and a little and a little, but if I want to get that one, I want to move my body to be closer to it, and then I'm not bending over. That's the shallow hoe. Sharp edge, doesn't cut too deep, but it's good for getting things that are near the surface. And things need to be kind of soft for the shallow hoe to cut through. It cuts well through soft soil with little weeds in it. Now the heavy hoe, remember how I said it'll do the work for you? Again, I'm not a very big person, but it's actually easier. I'm using the strength of my arms and hands to lift the hoe and control its fall. I'm not whacking, because that would hurt my wrists, and I might need my wrists later. So I'm just lifting it, letting it fall, not lifting it very high. I should also mention that this ground is frozen right now, so it's extra hard. So if you're working in ground that's frozen or compacted, or you're removing a lawn to make new garden beds, this heavy hoe will really help you out. And at the end, I'll talk about where you can get tools without breaking your bank. You only disturb your soil if there's a reason to. So getting weeds out, chopping up soil that's really compacted. Another thing you might want to use tools for is incorporating fertilizer or other amendments. So this is one of my favorite soil amendments. These are ashes from my wood stove. We heat our house with wood, and the ashes have lots of minerals, calcium, magnesium, not a lot of nitrogen because that burns off, but for the Pacific Northwest, which is where I am, these are a great soil amendment. So sprinkle a little on the soil surface. And the longer the blade of the hoe, the deeper it's going to get chopped in. You don't have to chop it in very deep. So I'll show you with the little hoe first. There's a rock. The soil is very rocky. Trying not to bend over. Now let's do it with the big hoe. Ooh, rock. Okay. This brings us to our other two tools. The rake is good for shallowly incorporating amendments, which is what I'm doing. It has pretty much the same depth as the narrow hoe and use pretty much the same technique. The other thing the rake is really good for is shaping beds after you've chopped them up. It's also good for getting bits of dry weeds out of the soil or rocks. You usually use the rake at the end, after you've done any chopping you need to do with your hoe, ideally your heavy hoe. The rake is great for making things nice and smooth. If you want a fine seed bed for planting tiny little seeds, like if you're planting carrots or lettuce or mustard greens, any of those tiny little seeds that you might be direct seeding in your garden, then it's nice to rake out a nice smooth seed bed. And I am bending over a little bit. One thing you can do to save your back, if you need to bend over, you can bend your knees and get down. The reason I'm doing this is that I want to be able to see, and I don't have my glasses on, so I just want to see that I got my seed bed nice and fine. So let me show you again the rake. Something you can go really lightly on the soil surface. That's the rake. And then the digging fork. We didn't really talk about the digging fork. If your beds are already well established and you don't have a compacted layer, you're probably not going to be using the digging fork to prepare beds. The digging fork is great for digging out deep roots, whether you're harvesting something like parsnips, or if you're trying to get out a deep-rooted weed like a big mallow plant. The digging fork is good for that, and you put it straight up and down, just like using a shovel, and step down on it. The other thing people sometimes like to use the digging fork for is for incorporating amendments. Now this does require bending over, so again you want to bend your knees. Let's get a little more of our ashes. So some people like to incorporate their amendments this way. So I'm crouching way down. And truthfully, that's not my favorite way. I would only do that if I didn't have a hoe, because the hoe you can use standing up. But the digging fork is a useful tool to have for certain things. It's also good when you're preparing new beds if you feel like there's a layer of big rocks down there. When we established this garden, there was a layer of cobbles about 6 inches down, and the digging fork works much better than a shovel for getting those cobbles out. About taking care of our bodies, let's talk about tool safety. I used to be a school gardener working with children, and I called this class How to Work in the Garden Without Hurting Your Friends or Yourselves, or How to Use Tools Without Hurting Your Friends or Yourselves. One of our rules is always keep the metal part of the tool below your knees. Very hard to hit your friend in the face with it if it's below your knees. And I also told the kids, walk towards the thing you want to dig so you're not reaching and reaching and reaching and reaching and reaching. Because when you're old, you might still want your back. And third thing, always put your tools face down. You ever see those cartoons where the road runner's running down the highway and Wile E. Coyote is chasing him, and he steps on the rake and the rake comes up and hits him in the face? So always keep your tools face down. Then nobody's going to step on them, hit themselves in the face. And last but not least, remember to sharpen your hoes and your shovels, and everything will be easier for you. All right, so that's how you use these tools. And now I want to briefly talk about where you can get good tools without emptying your wallet. Again, good tools really are an investment, especially if you're growing your own food. You're going to be saving money at the grocery store. You're going to have better nutrition. Your family and your community are going to be healthier. It's really worth investing in tools that will help you to not hurt your back while you're growing your own food. So, the Heavy Hoe, not the easiest to find. I'm not sure why. Again, if you go to garden centers or the hardware store, they tend to only have these lighter kinds of hoes. This is often called a Contractor Grade Hoe. I bought this one at a place in Southeast Portland called Ted's Tool Shed that has a really wide selection of used tools. They're kind of a mixed bag. Some of them are in great condition and some of them aren't, and some of them are dirt cheap and some of them are expensive. You have to kind of rummage through them. They also have a really good selection of contractor grade brand new tools. I bought this brand new. It was only $16. Brand is Corona. It's pretty decent, you know. Sturdy. I've had it for 15 years. So if you're in Portland, I recommend Ted's Tool Shed in Southeast Portland. The other places I recommend in Portland, the Cully Urban Farm Store in the Cully neighborhood of Northeast Portland. A really great small collection of reconditioned tools that Farmer Ted, no relation to the other Ted, finds at garage sales and estate sales, and he tunes them up and sells them for very reasonable prices, and he's a wealth of information as well. I love Farmer Ted. So check out the Cully Urban Farm Store for high quality reconditioned used tools. And then two other places I recommend if you're here in Portland, Oregon: Naomi's Urban Farm Store in Southeast Portland. Naomi has a carefully curated collection of high quality brand new tools, not dirt cheap, but really good tools that will last you a lifetime. And there is a blacksmith out in Boring. His business is called Red Pig Tools, and he makes hand forged heavy hoes and other heavy duty garden tools. So if you want to go on a field trip, those are not dirt cheap because they're handmade, but they're good heavy duty tools that you can resharpen over and over again and they won't wear out, and they're made of good steel. The other things are garage sales, free boxes, Goodwill, people that are going out of town. My friend gave me this digging fork when she went to hike the Pacific Crest Trail. I don't know what she paid for it, but she didn't need it anymore. There's lots of ways that a resourceful person can get the things you need for free or very cheap. I believe that my roommate got this hoe at a garage sale for $2. Good investment. Bastard file came from my local hardware store, cost $10 plus $3 for the wooden handle. So, worthwhile investment. Another really excellent way to save money and also save the planet, because we're not mining as much steel, is to share tools with your neighbors. If you have a plot at a community garden, there's probably a shed where there's tools for everybody to share. And if everybody takes care of the tools, then we're showing capitalism that sharing can actually work. I know a lot of people have had some disappointing experiences with sharing, but if we all put our energy into taking care of things that are shared, then we'll be able to share. So whether you're sharing tools with your neighbors or just taking good care of tools that you use yourself, take care of your tools. Your tools take care of you. You take care of your body. Think of tools as an investment. Last thing I'm going to do before I put these tools away in the garage is clean them. I'll scrape the dirt off. I'll go rinse them in a bucket of rainwater. I'll put them in the sun to dry for a little bit, and then I'll hang them up on the tool rack. And then they'll last a long time. So share your tools, share your vegetables, share your community.